Underwhelming might be a fair word to describe Penn State's 34-0 win over Florida International at Beaver Stadium in Week 2, Saturday, September 6th. It was, you think about noon games, you think about the starts, right? How energized is the team going to be? Is the team going to play down to its opponent, which in this case, Penn State came in as a 6-touchdown favorite. And it looked like, was it a combination of all of that today? Who knows? But in any case, Penn State started off slow, only led by 10 at halftime. And yeah, the final score, 34-0, does look convincing. But 2 of those touchdowns were scored in garbage time. And those who watched the game, I don't think anybody rational was pushing the panic button, Kyle Golik, but I don't think anybody's overly satisfied either.
There's a lot to be unsatisfied about, Joe. But one of the things that I would like our viewers to know is sometimes in these games, players come out flat. You go to work flat. It's the same concept here. Just from interviewing players over the years, sometimes you wake up and it's just, you're not motivated to play at peak performance because it's like, hey, it's Florida International. This should be a win. One of the things James has done a great job of since 2022 is when Penn State's favorite, they're 29-0. So it happened again here today. So one of the things that I would just tell fans is, I mentioned this to an FIU administrator in the elevator coming down to the field here for the end of the game, is one of the things that I appreciate from FIU that will bode well later for Penn State is I anticipated in my prediction that FIU would have that proverbial glass jaw for the boxing half. They didn't. They looked every hit Penn State gave them, and they swung back. I mean, it was negligible at the half, guys. With Sept, you saw the score. But what ends up happening is talent always comes through in the end. This is a good character win, if anything.
Yeah, let's talk about the good stuff. We'll talk about the offense later on because I think that's probably the biggest concern coming out of today's win. But defensively, no one's going to complain about a shutout, right? Chaz Coleman, fantastic. The defensive line as a whole, fantastic. You have defensive tackles picking off passes in back-to-back weeks. That hadn't happened since 1990. So overall, not a lot to complain about with Jim Knowles' defense. And how about special teams? Special teams was a big part of last week's win against Nevada with Ryan Barker hitting all 4 of his field goal attempts, with King Mack having a long kickoff return. And this week, kind of the same deal. You get a block punt from Dom DeLuca. You get a great punting from Gabriel Gross. Remember, Penn State didn't punt last week, so we didn't know who the starting punter was. Gross, who was announced as the starter past Monday, and he really delivered against FIU, and I don't think that role is changing anytime soon. But really, in 2 of the 3 phases, when you break it down, as underwhelming as this game, and particularly the first half, is going to feel, 2 to 3 phases, pretty good.
So, defense, A+. Joe, I'm going to disagree with you on special teams.
There was the blocked field goal, which I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Blocked field goals, 1 and 2 kicks out of bounds. Not 1, 2. Those are automatic F big plays. Conversely, they had equally amount of A plays. So, is it a C performance from the special teams? That's where I'm at. It's one of those things, if they cleaned all that up, it's an A+ effort. I think the biggest question mark is, one of the things I always tell people is national championship teams, kickers are money from 45 out, and they give you a chance from 45 and beyond. That block kick, there was not a chance. James explained postgame, a lot of that had to do with cut blocking, but guess what? This is the time you got to make those kicks, because maybe you're in a game against Ohio State, Oregon, or in the college football playoff, and you need that long kick to secure something. So I'm giving the special teams a C, Joe.
Yeah, and you look at these games, you got to look at situations and think, okay, let's circle this because it's not going to cost Penn State today, but maybe it costs them down the line. A great example is the block field goal you just mentioned. The play that James Franklin referred to, where the same thing happened last year. That was in a game against Minnesota. At Minnesota, if you remember, Penn State almost lost that game, and if it had, those 2, I think there were 2 blocked field goals, would have made a big difference. You think about, this was an issue last week, not finishing drives. Penn State's first 7 possessions, all 7 of them, or maybe it was 7 of the first 8, Penn State wasn't in Nevada, not Nevada, ended in FIU territory. All they got were a touchdown in the field goal. So finishing drives has been an issue, and it was something that James Franklin was asked about again in his post-game press conference. And, you know, we said it after the Nevada game last week, Kyle, to beat Ohio State and Oregon and whoever we're going to play in the playoffs, you can't settle for free. You got to get settled.
Agreed. And a lot of that I attribute to the passing game today. You know, I wrote about Khalil Dinkins, and I still feel he's going to play a major role for Penn State this year. But while he had the touchdown, he got his first touchdown of the season, 1 for 5 with a drop, a really big one for that matter. You can't have that in a situation. But on the flip side, one of the things that we've talked about personally is Luke Reynolds looks to be becoming that #1 tight end that's been living up to that 5-star billing. So I'm thinking, you know, there's going to be a role for Khalil, and there's going to be a role for Luke, and I think Luke's going to be more leveraged in the passing game, because if you're catching 7 of 9 targets every week, it's almost, I think it's 77%, you know, complete. That's what Tyler Warren did last year. You know, that's what Penn State needs. All it needs is safety valve.
Yeah, and we'll end this by talking more about the offense. Drew Howard, James Franklin said in his post-game presser, in as many words, that it wasn't Drew Howard's best day. I wasn't in Drew Howard's but I'm sure he would have said that it wasn't his best game. The Penn State passing game wasn't really sharp all day, aside from that long touchdown completion to Devontae Ross in the third quarter. The running game, yeah, the numbers look really good. Katron Allen had delivered above 140 yards the first Penn State back to break the century mark this season. But the explosion wasn't there. Nicholas Singleton's longest run, only 16 yards. Allen had that, I think it was a 67-yarder at the end, but that was in garbage time. So the offensive line, I don't think it's been great. The passing game wasn't great, and Penn State technically won the explosive play battle. But James Franklin said he'd like to see more explosion, and I'd agree with him.
I'm gonna disagree on some of your points here. So I thought the offensive line played great. A lot of the incompletions I put on the Penn State intended receivers for not being in the area where it be. That's how Drew passes. It's not like in your backyard, so it's where you sit there and go, pitch it to me. You got to be there. It's all rhythm. A lot of those throws weren't there. Trevor Pena had on the first drive of the game, classic one there. From the running game perspective, this was my one gripe, and this is to me one of the biggest things that's going to be detrimental to Penn State later. You know, the only guys that got rushes and touches were Katron and Nick, and they averaged about 8 yards a carry between the both of them. But here, not being able to finish drives and put away Florida International early, guys like Corey Smith and Cam Wallace and Quentin Martin and Tyke Hayes didn't get any touches. These are the games you're going to get most of your valuable reps in. For them to get 0, that might be the biggest thing that hurts Penn State from today.
And think about even Ruckenmeyer too. He didn't get the reps that we would have liked to see.
But the positive is your starters played a 4th quarter game essentially.
Right.
So it's like you take the good with the bad, but you wanted to see more of the reserves. You kind of wanted to see the early Mike Tyson knockout. But I'll take 34-0 wins all day.
Yeah, and Penn State has another game that could have a similar or worse scoreline next week. But Villanova comes to Beaver Stadium. It's a pretty pretty kick, so Penn State won't be able to blame any sluggishness on the early kick. It's going to be a 3:30 like the Nevada game was. Penn State's going to be hoping for more of a Nevada-like performance and an FIU-like performance against Villanova, and then obviously the Oregon whiteout game is the week after that. For a lot of people, that's when the season truly begins. But until then, Joe Smeltzer here, Kyle Fatman Golik at Disney Sports Now. Shout out to our photographer Matt Lynch for being behind the camera or the phone in this case. Matt will have pictures up on Disney Sports Now. Kyle and I will have articles up, and we'll be tweeting away our takes from this 34-0 Penn State win over FIU at Beaver Stadium.
Hey Joe, we better get out of here before they run us over, man.